Good afternoon. I'm Tendani Mpulubusi, and I'm here today at the Longburn building because I want to share my voice, my opinion and my experience as our United States of America is facing another type of pandemic, another type of epidemic where violence is just running more rampant and it's becoming more senseless. And I'm sharing this experience based on experience with violence, with gun violence. My main purpose here is to urge Congress, urge the United States leadership to not only to consider the basics first, of course. You know, there can be an age limit to when you can purchase an assault rifle, right? You can't drink till you're 21. You can purchase an assault rifle at 18. Maybe there should be a background check. There are different things that you can do on a basic level to help prevent gun violence. But what I don't want Congress and society to do is forget that beyond the basic policies of administratively managing people's access to guns, there's a bigger social issue here. And this is the mentality and cultural and social fabric of America that is deteriorating. And so as we look to do administrative processes to protect people from having access to guns that shouldn't, we also have to look into how we commit and dedicate resources to the causes of mental illnesses and the causes of gun violence. You know, I'm a fourth-generation native Washingtonian. I was born here in Washington, D.C. I can walk to the White House from my residence. I can bike to the White House from my residence. And I grew up in the 80s and 90s in D.C., when D.C. was the murder capital of the world a couple of times for street violence. You know, in those days, you know, I experienced violence. I saw gun violence. It was glorified on television. It was glorified amongst the black community in general through music, through media. And, you know, as a young person, in contrast to now being an adult, I'm seeing a difference in some of these trends of violences. But there's violence that is caused by poverty, and there's violence that's caused by mental illness. You know, a lot of the violence, of the gun violence I saw growing up, was due to social conditions, due to poverty. This was a culture of people who've been economically shut out, and they got involved in dangerous activities to try to make ends meet. And as a result, got in a state of warfare. And as a result of that, they use weapons to protect themselves and sometimes prey on people. And now I'm seeing random shootings in the mall and random shootings in the store that really don't quite add up to, you know, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Don't quite add up to any particular reason that particular people have done something to you. Now you retaliate. Now we're seeing gun violence where people have been so far gone or neglected or abandoned, and they're in a mental space in which they have totally detached from the general sense that we have to respect and regard life, and then they now are in a mental space where they take life with no thought. The lives of children, the lives of seniors, the lives of adults, and it's a social. We have to really examine what has to happen in a community for somebody to become that debased and it not be detected. You know, one of the first things I learned in youth development, right? You mentor some children sometimes, and it's like, wow, this child is so well behaved. And then you mentor other children sometimes, it's like, whoa, this child is off the hook. And then you meet the parents, and then it adds up. It's like, okay, I get it. And then you go to the environment of where they grow up and where they live and they raise, and then it makes sense. So we're now in a society where we're the village, and we're letting our people go so far beyond. You know, you have a neighbor who could potentially detect, you know what, this person's, they off mentally. This person, they don't seem like they're doing so well. Let me check on them. You have a parent in that household. you have a brother, you have a sister. And when we get to a place where people get in this mentality and nobody knows about it, that's not just a reflection of that person who committed that heinous act. That's a reflection of the family being not attentive, not aware. You know, that's a reflection of the community and the people around that person. And so what I urge the United States leadership to do, and the Congress to do, and the senators and the government and our leaders to do, is examine the nature in which people become that debased, and be innovative in how to engage and how to empower families and communities. This is why we had community watches. This is why we have neighborhood watch groups that sit on the porch and try to prevent petty crime, you know, try to make sure burglaries don't happen, try to make sure, you know, car thefts don't happen. You know, people put on matching t-shirts or matching hats, and they will watch the community. You know, I grew up in an era where, you know, my friends and I would be playing outside, and if we were mischievous, there would be a neighbor on the balcony or somebody who would say, hey, y'all need to stop doing that. Just because she was an adult, we would respect what she said, and we would not give her no lip. We wouldn't do anything. Because then our parent would not go back and try to fight that parent for enforcing that discipline. Our parent, my mother, would thank her for speaking to us. And, you know, if we're not in a community where we have that village and we have that support, it's easy to lose people. It's easy for people to fall into a mentality and an idea, you know, that's often promoted by, you know, some of the video games they play or some of the things they watch on TV. So we got to do something in our schools, you know, that addresses this. We got to do something in our community centers that addresses this. We got to do something, most importantly, in our households that address this. Because, you know, in order for a gun to hurt somebody, somebody has to pick it up and use it. You know, a gun sitting on a shelf doesn't hurt anybody. A gun sitting with no ammunition doesn't hurt anybody. But when you go grab some bullets and you put it in a gun with the intent to hurt and harm, people get hurt and harmed. And then common sense, people, you know, and it goes back to the household and common sense. You have weapons laying around, they're unprotected, they're unlocked. You know, your child, when's the last time you've been in your child's room? You know, they got an assault rifle sitting under the bed you don't know about. Do they have access to yours? Common sense solves a lot of problems in the world. So I feel like it's a time for us all to come together. You know, this issue of violence, it goes beyond socioeconomic status, goes beyond race, it goes beyond religion. It's a national problem. It's an American problem that we have to deal with. And the rest of the world is looking like, what's going on in America? Why are they having these issues? There's a lot of things to re-examine. And so I urge our leadership to look at the root causes, not just put a Band-Aid over this issue, but look at the root causes and look at how we can commit resources to strengthening the cultural fabric of our society so that we don't allow people, or so that we support more people, or so that we make it a little better for people not to fall into that mind and that spirit and that dark sunken place where they just want to hurt and harm people for no reason, where people want to go out and target innocent people who've never caused them harm, who've never done anything. And so once we have people getting to a place now where you want to hurt somebody who never did anything to you, that's a very scary place. That's an unpredictable place to be. And I think that the leadership and the attention of a parent, of a brother, of a sister, of a friend, of a neighbor, of a teacher, of a mentor, that attention and that awareness, it can be the catalyst. It can be the catalyst to preventing the next mass shooting. But when people are left estranged and when people are stuck in a world where they're not engaged by loving, caring people, or they're stuck in a world where their interest has been sparked by something hurtful and harmful, it's got to be a village of people to connect with these individuals and help shine a light because we're all human. We can fall into very dark places. I experienced violence, and I recall one of my first most traumatic experiences was someone got shot around the corner from my house. And not only did they get shot when they were standing up, they got shot when they fell on the ground. And not only did they bleed all over the ground, but the blood was left on the ground for weeks and not even cleaned up. And I was 10 years old when I saw this. And it makes you want to have a gun to protect yourself from someone who could do that to you. It didn't make me want to go do the same thing just because I saw it. But times are different. Times have changed. It's bigger than a turf war. It's bigger than that actually happened over somebody owing somebody $100, But now we're in a time where you get shot up, you didn't owe anybody any money, you didn't beat up anybody, you didn't do anything. You were just there at the wrong place in the wrong time, and you got hit by a bullet that didn't have anybody's name on it. And so I urge us to refocus on the issue of violence and understand that we're in a new time as it relates to violence, because it's gone beyond any rhyme or reason. So you got to put in protective measures and consider how easily we give people access. And in addition to how easy we give people access, you got to consider the nature of the village and the environment of this person, because this person's mental environment has been influenced by his social environment. And this person is probably estranged socially before they become estranged mentally. There's an exception to every rule, but there's also a science to everything that it can explain most things. There's a science that can explain the exceptions to the rules if you dig deep enough. But with the basic common sense that we have, we got to start looking out for our people. And every American must be selfless enough and considerate enough to take the time just to pay attention to the mental wellness and the well-being of their brother, their child, their sister, their father, their neighbor. And if you feel like someone is off, or someone has expressed that they want to do harm to themselves and others, you have to talk to this person. You have to engage this person. You have to assess this. You have to talk about it within your community, and it has to be addressed. Because now we're in a time where the violence is becoming more senseless. I'm used to violence being hood related, but it's gone beyond that now. And Congress should absolutely act and do what it can to place measures that will help protect our citizens. I don't believe that the police should have all the guns. I would like my right to be armed. Yes, I would. I don't believe that guns kill people. People use guns to kill people. But what I do believe and what I do know for a fact is that when you grow up in a household without love, without feeling cared for, and you grow up in a community without feeling involved, included, and cared for, you lose contact with those things that cause you to regard life, because you never felt regarded for. And I think as we go throughout and we assess those who have committed these acts, we find a common bond. The people are estranged. The people felt abandoned. The people were lost. And nobody noticed. And when you're a young person, you have a home that you go to, and you don't pay the bills. You live with an aunt, an uncle, your parents, your mother, your father. They may be working a lot. They may not have the time to check in on you. They may be struggling themselves to keep it together. And this is why it takes a village. Because even though this young person goes home every day, it could be what's going on in the home that's causing them to become hateful. It takes a village. It truly takes a village of neighbors checking on each other, families being engaged, not with the spirit of talking down on people, not with the spirit of just getting in people's business just to talk down. No, but with the spirit of genuine concern, consideration, and care for your neighbor. My mother told me she grew up in a household where there were no more shoes than there were feet. And with my shoe collection, I couldn't see it. I love to collect shoes. But that just goes to say the values that were placed in her generation. You know, she's a baby boomer. And she grew up in a household, in a community, she said, where everybody had a place to sleep, you know. And everybody had something to do. You know, my grandfather, Lloyd D. Smith, who founded the Marshall Heights Community Development Organization in Washington, D.C., and growing up, I saw pictures with him. There's a picture with him, the Queen of England, Congresswoman Norton, Barbara Bush, Sharon Pratt Kelly, all in the same picture in Ward 7, where he helped build that shopping center over in Minnesota Avenue. And they would tell me stories about how even the bum, or maybe somebody was hooked on drugs in the street, he gave him a broom and he gave him a job to clean up and help clean the grounds. He found something for everybody in society to do. And I feel like if we follow that spirit of Lloyd D. Smith, where you find a place for everybody and you include more people in uplifting activity, if you include more people in the activity where they see their value and their contribution to society, you have less people destroying and being destructive to the community. The more people have to do to build up, typically, the more committed they are to constructing and not destroying. So we're in a time where economics are hard and inflation is high, and we just made it through a pandemic, and now we got this to deal with. Got to be more resilient. We got to use arts, culture, technology to engage people. We got to use the basics to keep people moving forward, focused, finding their place, finding their value. It's a very dark place not to know where you're wanted, where you're needed, where you're loved. You don't feel like a part of the human family. You don't feel like you belong. You don't feel any value. And so when your life isn't valued by you, when do you value the lives of others? You don't love yourself. When do you love others? Dealing with the basics here, nothing new under the sun. We just have to ask what we've been doing with our resources, what type of innovative policies and programs and initiatives we have, how effective have they been, and do we continue to do business the same, or do we update our practices in terms of how we engage people socially, in terms of how curriculum in school addresses these issues. And, you know, we got institutions that are not government, community centers, churches. What are we all doing as a community to address these issues at the root is the question. So again, we need to have policies and administrative measures in place that do just not allow people to have access to guns who may potentially use them to do senseless violence. Yes, we need the right to bear arms to protect our property, our families, our households, and ourselves. I'm a fan of concealed carry. However, there are people, just like they can't hold their liquor, they don't need access to a firearm. We can't blindly, legally just pass away firearms to people who are using them to commit senseless violence. So there has to be some system to vet and evaluate. In addition to that system, the administrative process of it all. I say it again, and I've said it again, and I'll say it again. We got to check the cultural fabric of our communities. We have to check the cultural fabric of our households and our families. And we do need to take a look at how we are using, all of the forms of entertainment to influence. Because there are some of us who can tell the difference, who can compartmentalize that information experience, and clearly some of us who can't. So as a father, as a member of the community, as a native Washingtonian, I will absolutely urge our leadership to put in its administrative processes that will provide some access controls to having a little more responsibility as it relates to gun control, a lot more responsibility as it relates to the social fabric of our country. Thank you for listening. I hope you heard me and you felt me. Definitely coming from the heart, coming from the experience. And I'd like to see something new. I'd like to see us not to do the same old things and expect new results, but I'd like to see an intergenerational approach to meet this challenge, where we all work together, put our common sense together, and make this make sense. God bless you. God bless America.